Thank you, Piers. We'll open up the floor now. If you have any questions or comments or queries, I'm sure you may have a number of questions, in particular what Dr. Fong has also mentioned regarding some of the health measures that have been put in place overall within the economic framework. The other issue that I just wanted to highlight before we open the floor is, you know, that government has been paying out unemployment benefits, which we started with now, of course, in the second phase. We are looking at the third phase and hopefully make some announcements on that regarding the fact that there are some people who are, they may not be what we call completely unemployed, but they may be working reduced hours. So there are some people, for example, instead of working 5 days a week, now they're only working 1 day a week, or 2 days a week, or 3 days a week. And obviously, if they are the only sole breadwinner, so to speak, is not enough for them to survive on. So we are currently in discussions with FNPF, and government obviously has allocated some funds in that respect. It's working out the mechanism as to the actual rollout of the third phase, and we hope to make that announcement soon. But those of you who are employers, you'll have to verify that people are working reduced hours. Please let there be no collusion. We've seen in some instances where people are trying to collude. Please don't do that, because, you know, we're in it for the long haul. And if there's going to be collusion, if there's going to be people who won't be upright about it or honest about it, then obviously it becomes not sustainable to be able to carry on with these types of measures. The reality of the matter is we know that, you know, we don't know how long this will last, this pandemic will last. We were, you know, asked questions yesterday. I think there's one question about vaccines. You know, when will the new vaccine comes out? Nobody knows that. Of course, a number of European countries have put large sums of money aside for that and for the development of vaccines. We have, from our part, we have recently, just a few days ago, we had a meeting with a number of the small states within the World Bank Forum, where we are raising the issue that when the vaccine does come out, should it come out, that it should not be treated as a commodity, it should not be commodified. It should be treated as a public good. Because if you treat it as a public good, then it'll be approached differently. And of course, the idea is also for Fiji to actually get on top of the list, because there is some thinking that the vaccine should only be given, or the priority should be given to only those countries that actually have had large number of cases. But our argument is, of course, that if you don't have, if vaccine becomes the norm, the new norm, to trade, to travel, then if you have smaller countries like Fiji that have had very low cases of COVID-19, and because we are small economies, we'll be doubly punished if we don't have access to the vaccine quickly. Because then our people won't be able to travel, people won't be able to travel to Fiji, and that will affect your economy in a much bigger way. So that's some of the, you know, the discussions, the discourse that we are engaging in internationally to be able to put our case forward. These things actually happen behind the scenes, but we need to be able to think ahead to ensure that we don't lose out in the event that there is a vaccine, because the way the current climate is, you can bet your bottom dollar most countries will make it a requirement for travel that you actually get vaccinated. You know, in the same way, previously, if you did not have a particular vaccine, you could not travel to certain countries, or there's a requirement to do that. And given the way that the borders have actually shut down in this particular pandemic, there'll be a lot more stringent requirement in that respect. So these are some of the discussions that are sort of, you know, held off the chart, so to speak. But let's open the floor if you have any questions or queries for any of the speakers here, please. Thanks.
Bulavinaka, everybody. My name is Apolosi. I currently represent the District Council of Social Services. Today, sir, we would like to extend our big Vinaka Vakalevu to the Lautoka Business House, who have currently donated more than 200 food bags. Some of them are seated in your presence today. And as well as our queries and question goes up to the Care Fiji team. We have 35 communities that are in our care, including 12 that has been assisted by the business houses. Some even social groups such as Bread Bank, Telecom Fiji. These are minor social groups that got together to help these people that are in the vulnerable community. The Honourable Minister, we would like to ask, with your assistance, if you could ask the Care Fiji team to assist the District Council in training them so that they can go out in the field and help empower the 35 communities, which some of these women are in microfinances. They gather under the coconut trees as well as some uta trees and behind the houses, giggling and laughing, not fully aware of what Care Fiji is. So it is my humble request today that if Care Fiji could get on board and help us, the District Council of Social Services, empower these communities. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Santosh from New India Assurance. As the largest general insurer in Fiji market, whenever there is a fire incident reported in news, the first question that comes to our mind is to whether the property is insured. But unfortunately for the victim, most of the time we find that the domestic buildings, that is the residential properties, which end up in these fire incidents are not insured. So as an insurer, we have not been able to push this product too much, because of two factors. One is affordability and the other is awareness. On the point of affordability, I would like to request the Minister for Economy to look at a way of probably reducing the impact of levies, especially on this insurance that we offer to the domestic buildings, to the lower strata, people belonging to the lower strata in the society. As of now, the levies go up to 25%, which makes this product unaffordable for most of the people. Those who are insuring are mostly from the high net worth individuals or those with a bank loan. So most of the properties that end up in these fire incidents are not insured.
So, sorry, which levies are you talking about?
I'm talking about the FSL, that is fire service levy, VAT, and the around 25% levies that we charge on insurance product. We are charging this on par with all commercial insurance that we offer, which probably can be cross-subsidized from the revenue that government receives from the commercial insurance.
I'm sure you've given your submissions. I mean, there's no doubt that the rate of home insurance in Fiji is very low, in particular for cyclone. As you know, there are very stringent requirements placed by insurance companies regarding cyclone insurance. That's another kettle of fish, I suppose. But you're talking specifically only about fire. And of course, you know, yes, there are incidences of fire, but one of the greatest claims we get is from cyclone insurance. And one of the areas that we are working in, obviously the insurance companies in Fiji have not really come to the party regarding that. And I'm sure a lot of people are shaking their heads in agreement. And that we have a higher rate of, you know, cyclones and much more massive damage regarding that. We are currently working with the World Bank and various other international agencies to see how we can actually provide cyclone cover, at least in respect of providing some form of cover, not necessarily full indemnity cover, but at least a basic form of cover. And I look forward to the insurance companies also coming to party in Fiji regarding that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Sir, could I please raise a question to the doctor in the house? Thank you. Sir, we are drafting up a plan which is called Savavata, or Clean Together. This is to empower children and women in the community. We would just like to ask, because we do not know how to push and where to push and how to outreach, to allow the district council to piggyback with the Ministry of Health, since we have the communities and we have the data. Could we be assisted in this as our volunteers are getting empowered daily? We would like to ask you if you could please assist us in this, in terms of the Lautoka district to be covered in these 35 communities, just through the hand wash program, and if there is a proposal that we could reach out to cover this program. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I've worked with a lot of our health inspectors, and I do know that there is a wash program that they are finalizing again. We had to rebudget again to sort out the wash program. It's part of an outreach program. I will get back to you. I mean, if we can exchange a few emails, I will get you in touch with the person who's actually heading this. I must admit also that a lot of what you are saying is part of the remodeling of health provision plan that we have pulled together, because we are looking at strongly sorting out a way of having our health services being reached out to people rather than people coming to the facility. It is in our interest for us to avoid crowding in any facility, and therefore we need to recreate some way of providing health service outside of health facilities. And that fits in exactly with what you are asking in terms of outreach.
Good morning, AG, Minister, and representatives of the Ministry. Firstly, thank you for coming out to our city today to speak with stakeholders and business people. Wearing two hats today. So, firstly, as a business owner, with the direct impact of tourism, many of us are really heavily focused at the moment on manufacturing and export. I, for one, have just had a substantial order from the US, but the freight costs for both air and sea are astronomical. This then impacts the margins at the other end for our distributors. It really is a major concern, and I'm not sure what can be done, but this really needs to be looked at. Secondly, now, as SA Chair for Lautoka Council, firstly, Ministry of Health will be happy to know that yesterday we've already started dialogue on how we can improve our public conveniences and other areas to align with COVID-19 safe practices. I do have a question for our market vendors, for our kava sellers. Up until now, we have only been allowing them to sell dried waka, but we've just heard that they had started mixing and selling grog, which we only found out yesterday. So I would just like to know whether they are permitted to now mix kava or they're still only allowed to sell dried waka, vinaka.
Yeah. No, they are permitted to sell to serve the mixed kava. It's similar to a cooking. We've decided that we will take that line. If everybody can cook food and serve food in the restaurant using the most hygienic measures, then of course the same should apply to people who are mixing kava for a large number of people. I think at some point there was just some discussion that the person mixing the kava might spread disease around. But if that was the case, then we feel that most of Fiji would have been down already. So we are quite happy, dry, and the cover bars are open. That's what I'm saying.
Vinaka, I enjoy a billo, so thank you.
I think in respect of the freight, in particular air freight, the reality of the matter is that the Fiji Airways, which is the only airline that's been flying to LA, Hong Kong, Sydney, Auckland, carrying out freight. Air New Zealand is now doing freight also, but only between Auckland and Nandi. Fiji Airways is actually not making a profit at all. It's running actually on cost, just covering its cost. And I'm sure you appreciate the fact as a business person that when you have the top part of the plane empty and only the bottom part filled up, obviously there'll be a price variation. But the fact of the matter is they're not making a profit at all. They're simply covering the cost. And we are able to do that because it is the national carrier and we can obviously talk to them. And they're providing very valuable service to people like you who are exporting. Predominantly about 80% of the freight that goes out of Fiji at this point in time is all agricultural produce. Yangona, kava, bhindi, bhaji, dalo, cassava, all of that. And it's a very important source of livelihood for people, vegetable farmers up in the Sayed-Khaiyum valleys and various other parts of Fiji. So obviously when the passengers start flying, then you can defray those costs and spread those costs with passengers and of course the freight cost itself. But the reality of the matter is, can you imagine if we did not have a national carrier? If we did not have a national carrier, you would not have any freight flights. And we've continued freight flights throughout this period. So we would not have any exports to USA, because nobody's flying to USA. In fact, at one point in time, a lot of the freight that Fiji Airways was carrying from LA to Nandi was actually bound for Auckland. And then they were bringing it from LA to Nandi and then Nandi to Auckland. So unfortunately we have to roll with the punches, as they say, at this point in time. But once we have the passengers coming through, then those costs will be able to be spread.
It was mentioned that tourism contributes to 40% of the GDP. And in terms of long-term planning, do you still see that being the case in the future?
Well, I think, one of the, we've had a number of public budget consultations, and in that we have always stressed year in, year out that one of the key economic strategies we had was to be able to spread our risk, and that is diversify our economy. So not, at one point in time, if you go back into history, Fiji was simply dependent on sugar. That was the only source of actually foreign earnings. That was the major, economic earner. And then, of course, you had tourism that came in. We have over the past number of years, and if you see, we don't have this graphs here, but you would see over the past number of years, the spread in terms of the contribution towards the GDP is going to other sectors too. For example, ICT, etc. So we obviously want to expand that because it's important to spread your risk. I mean, it's a very simple thing. Like government contributed seed funding towards Fiji Airways to build the aviation academy at in Namaka. You'll see that. The reason why we did that is obviously to create a hub. Now, before this pandemic, even before the facility was built, we already had airlines asking Fiji Airways if they can come and do the simulation training here. And that's spreading your risk because that's a different sort of source of revenue. They would occupy the hotel rooms, etc., and eat food. So we're doing that in the ICT space too. At this point in time, obviously it's a bit difficult, but that is the focus. But let me just give you a very important statistic. We get only 4% of the outbound Australian market. Only 4%. And they are the largest source market for us. But only 4%. New Zealand, only 6%. So 94% of Kiwis who travel overseas every year, we only get 6%. 94% of Kiwis. 96% of Aussies don't come to Fiji, they go somewhere else. So obviously there's potential there too. But within the tourism sector itself, we've been trying to spread our risk. So we were saying, let's not only be dependent on those two countries, get more Chinese, get more Indians, more Europeans, more North Indians, etc. Because these are the emerging markets. And that's how we spread our risk. So we spread our risk both within the tourism sector itself and also outside the tourism sector.
Representing Lautoka City Council. The Ministry of Local Government is pursuing in the concept of decentralization of the markets. And we have made budgetary submissions to our ministry for the areas that are within the council's jurisdiction. But there are some areas outside the council's jurisdiction, especially between Indian Lautoka and then Lautoka and Ba. One of the hotspots being Saweni. That we want to have a decentralized market being set up there, but that's outside the council's jurisdiction. So if that could be directed to the responsible ministry to have a look at setting up one there and a couple on the Ba side of Lautoka.
So what is the question?
Like the demand for decentralization is there, but within the council's jurisdiction, we are looking after it with avenues through our ministry. But those that are outside the council's jurisdiction, if that demand could be brought up to the relevant ministry or whoever looks after it.
Yes, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, as you know that, I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, government made the announcement that we will fund the decentralization of markets, whether you're living up in Phil 40, Tawakumbu, whatever it is, so you don't have to come to Lautoka market to do your shopping. I mean, that's the old colonial concept. One big market, one big bus stand next to it. Most of the towns are centered that way. And where they were started up, that's where they remained. Notwithstanding the fact that the population is actually spread out now. And people want to have more convenience at their doorstep. So yes, definitely it's one of the things we're doing. But a place like Sawani, you could actually say it's become a peri-urban area. So definitely, yes, we're looking at that. I mean, the Ministry of Commerce and Trade, as you know, set up these stalls, on the highways, etc. But place like Sawani, is obviously a huge population there, and obviously they do need markets, and we'll be looking at that. I mean, there's recently the Honourable PM opened the Langere market. I think one of the issues there is also to be able to, create that modern outlook for Fiji. We need to have actual identified market areas so people have proper sanitation. A lot of these people who, sell along the roadside, a lot of them, the sanitation facilities aren't there. So, I mean, those are the kind of things we're also looking at in terms of presentation. But yeah, definitely we're looking at that too.
Good morning. Thank you, ministers and officials, for coming out. I've just got a couple of questions. One on the health issue. There's a lot of talk about COVID-19 and the vaccine. Can someone give us an update in terms of the actual testing process? Because I understand that at the moment the cost of testing is quite high, and it takes a while for us to receive the information, whether it's a positive or a negative. If we are looking at the borders, it may be advantageous for us to have some sort of a testing facility that allows that a more direct result of COVID-19 presented a lot earlier, so that we can then say, yep, the guy is positive, or the guy is negative, or the person is positive or negative. Sorry, can I just ask one more? The second one is on the budget side. We talk a wee bit about duties and stuff. One of the areas, and I do understand that government's got a difficult role to play, especially in terms of having enough revenue to run the government, but at the same time allowing economic growth as well. One of the areas that seems to be is in the construction area. There is a lot of material that we import because we just don't have those raw materials available in Fiji. The duties on some of those materials are quite reasonable. If we could look at either parking those duties or actually reducing those duties to allow those materials to come in, because with construction there's a lot of added benefit, and a lot of cottage industries will benefit from that as well. So that I wonder if the government could have a look at that. The other thing also is there's a lot of people in New Zealand and Australia that sell stuff to Fiji in the construction industry. So if they do see a market opening up in Fiji, there is likely that they will travel as well as salespeople or managers, etc. as well. And that in turn will also bring in revenue in terms of tourism. Thank you.
So what we do test for are certain particles in the virus. The problem with testing for particles in the virus is that it doesn't tell you whether the virus is transmissible or not. So we do have some limitations. I know the purpose that you want us to test is to know whether you can transmit the virus to another person or not. That's the key question. The test does not answer that question specifically. It just says that you are harboring a particle of the virus. So based on that, we do have some problems. I mean, there will be some problems in terms of trying to ensure that we rely totally on the test as the means to protect both the community of Fiji and the community to which people are traveling to. It is one of the reasons why the quarantine is so important, because the longer the date of quarantine, the longer the time that a person is asymptomatic and then tested, it is more reliable in terms of saying that they cannot transmit the virus. Okay. So I think that when you're trying to get the question of making the test more readily available, getting it readily available is relatively, that's the most objective thing you can do. But putting it together with a quarantine condition is what's difficult. Now, the quarantine condition needs to be verified in order for other countries to feel safe. And this is the issue that we are struggling with, because if we can get multiple people that we engage with and talk with who can help us in the verification process of various people's quarantine, even if they're engaging in their normal work, it will give us a better protection in terms of coming into Fiji and going out of Fiji. And that is the kind of framework that requires a little bit more thinking, and it does require a little bit more innovative discussion to try and make sure that that people leaving our shores will not carry the disease out, and people coming in will not bring the disease in. I hope that will answer the question.
In respect of construction, I mean, there's no doubt, whenever there's been a downturn in global economies and economies throughout the world, I mean, if you look at the Great Depression, Sydney Harbour Bridge was built when there's a Great Depression. The government in those days invested in large-scale infrastructure projects, which essentially spurred the economy, got people employed. There are literally thousands of people who were employed. Of course, this is now the 21st century, but construction still matters. And one of the ways that we are looking at it, obviously, is trying to spur the private sector to engage in the construction sector. And there is no doubt a number of measures have already been announced, was announced, in fact, in the COVID-19 response budget, where there's a number of tax rebates, incentives have been given. Duties, I think, as you would appreciate, significantly reasonable. To reduce it further, of course, would on the proviso that it's actually passed on. As you know, previously we've reduced duty on many items, but when you have the importer of that being one person or two companies or even three companies, they have not necessarily passed it on to the consumer. They've essentially eaten the cream themselves. So that really is critically important. If we have open competition, and then people are able to bring those products, and then of course they'll compete naturally through the market. But the whole idea of duty reduction is that passed on, and there's no doubt this is a good time to actually build, because when you have less demand, obviously the construction companies are willing to take lesser fat or have a higher margin, and because everybody wants to engage, everybody wants to have cash flow. So we are no doubt looking at that that space regarding spurring construction.
Thank you, Minister for Economy. I come from the taxi industry, and I have a very important question here today. Is that in your COVID-19 response budget, you have announced that those who have borrowing or lending from the lending institutions like banks, and it was said in that budget that they would be given a time frame of 3 to 6 months, 3 months first and then 6 months later, whether it's a motor vehicle or a house mortgage. But some lendings from the taxi industry have moved forward to these lending institutions where they have been told that the bank doesn't belong to the government straight away. I have some people sitting here, they would see you after the meeting. And when it is the instructions that comes from the Reserve Bank and the government of the day, I think they should be accessed, and some notice has been given and some vehicles has been impounded just because, and they are losing out from business. Thank you, sir.
I mean, it is a fact we don't own the banks. The discussions we had, the Fijian government used to own a bank, National Bank of Fiji, you may recall, that of course we lost that during the SVT government days. But the fact of the matter is there's no bank that is actually owned directly by the Fijian government. The discussions we had with the financial institutions and the banks on a number of occasions, about 2 or 3 times we met up with them. We met initially, for example, the financial institutions, the hire purchase companies, and then we met with the banks also separately. And in our discussions, they did agree that the economy was obviously had been hit very hard by the pandemic, and then people would lose their jobs, and that they would go easy on people's repayment requirements. Some had said we'll go easy on the principal payments or give a holiday on the principal payments, but only people can pay the interest, etc. But legislatively we cannot force them to do that, because that's like interfering. It's like me telling you what to do in your taxi business, or telling Deborah what to do with her business. It's the same thing. But we can, obviously they play a very pivotal role in respect of the economy, so we had discussions with them in that respect. And a lot of them actually are providing, some form of relief, some form of comfort to their customers. Some may be doing better than others in terms of providing that confidence or comfort to their customers. Some recently we have heard have not. We hope to meet up with them again next week, the financial institutions, the banks, including the others, that are not your traditional banks and lending institutions, and see how we can get a fair idea of how they're treating their customers too.
Bula AG, Bula Minister,
Bula.
Permanent Secretaries. I'm sure there's been a lot of noise about the total 25% tax, service, STG, the ECOW, and the VAT, making up us uncompetitive with other destinations. I understand that we need that revenue, to fix up roads, fund education, medical for people of Fiji. What I would like to probably suggest, and wonder if it's an option, we already have a VAT refund scheme in place. And we pay ECOW, we pay STT, we pay the 9% VAT in the industry. Is the VAT refund scheme an option with the hotel industry to give some relief with those subjected to ECOW and STT? That's my question.
Sorry, So do you, I don't understand. What are you saying? Is VAT refund an option? You don't want it refunded?
No, we want it. What I'm saying is we already have a VAT refund scheme in place. Would that be an option for the industry?
You mean for refund on STT and ECAL?
Refund on VAT, the 9%. Because we're looking for some relief. We're looking for some relief on the 25% tax.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
you know, and since the refund scheme is in place already, that's the option is, you know, if it could be introduced into the hospitality industry.
Okay. I think, you know, there's obviously been a lot of discussions around tax, not just regarding VAT, STT, and ECAL, but also other taxes, even things like stamp duty, and of course duty generally on items that are being brought in. And, you know, we obviously are mulling over many of the submissions that have been made, both from the tourism sector and various other sectors. I think the point here is this, and I'd like to use the same analogy that I used for the duty reduction, that there needs to be a commensurate benefit that passes on to the customers. We've had this discussion before, as you know, in a former role, and currently now, of course, in yesterday in Nandi too, about, for example, somebody raised in the audience that the F&B in Fiji, in the hotel industry, food and beverage actually is very expensive. That the margins are quite high. You know, so you can have a bottle of Fiji water being sold for $15 in a hotel, a stubby being sold for $12 or $15 in some hotels. Now, just put into perspective, recently through some third parties, we had discussions with some hotel owners in Bali. And what they were saying is that they're looking forward to the borders opening and that they're all prepared to actually sell their room rates at basically cost, but they just want to capture the market. So you can bet your bottom dollar, all of these hotel destinations, whether it's your Bali, your Phuket and various other places, will really drastically reduce their prices. Now, whether it's in F&B, whether they'll sell the beer at a much cheaper price, the chips, whatever the food, etc., just to capture the market. There is no doubt Fiji will need to do the same too, to capture the market. Now, because we've had this discussion of a long period of time, the numerous studies have shown, for example, F&B may be a bit highly priced. The other thinking is that if we, for example, get rid of the taxes, for a minute if you think about it, if you get rid of the taxes, but the pricing structure for F&B, for example, room rates still remain the same, then you still won't be competitive enough. There needs to be some form of an incentive for the hotel industry to look at the actual pricing structure itself, apart from taxes. And government does recognize, obviously, if we're going to have taxes and no tourists coming in, but some taxes and more tourists coming in, we may end up making more money. We understand that. But we need to address the fundamental issue also. So, we are looking at various mechanisms, and one of the ways that we are looking at, obviously, is that the CEO of Fiji Airways was yesterday in the Nandi session. And Fiji Airways is now talking about a number of properties in respect of developing packages. There's a particular term that they're using for those packages. Now, if we have particular packages that is able to address the core pricing structure, then government could be much better placed to be able to incentivize those packages. So they say if you take this package which involves a Fiji Airways airline ticket, and this hotel is going to do X, Y, Z, maybe throw in kids' meals free or whatever, then you can target it specifically to give some incentives from the side. But if you just give an overall, carte blanche sort of waiver of taxes, etc., many people won't necessarily change their pricing structure. So you're not able to differentiate those people who are willing to come to the party and recognize what is required at this point in time. That's what we are looking at. But we're obviously very open-minded about these things. And there is an appetite to, look at the entire paradigm.
Sir, this would like to address the Honourable Minister, Mr. Khoya, if I may please address you. Thank you. Mr. Khoya, this is in terms of the people that we look after in the tourist industry. We see a lot of stress possibility of violence been starting at home because of the social, economical, and everything that's been happening at home. Sir, I'd like to ask you if possibility it be your initiative, as we call you down on the ground, you are our cool guy. Whenever we see you, we call you the cool guy. So if this could be your initiative to start probably a counseling line in the tourist industry for tourist people, just to call up and have somebody to talk to. And they just somebody to listen to, because a lot of them that have worked in the tourist industry have been living on money every day, like tips and wages and salaries. But now as the economy has gone down, not because of our government, but because of COVID-19, we would like to intentionally ask if this could be an initiative by you and your ministry to look into ways that a counseling sector be opened either in tourist industry, in the hotels, one by one, as mental health is our health, or probably a life counseling, or into your website where people can just log in and just put in a question in one of those side of the website, just a slog a little bit, and like, talk to me. People can just add in their question, somebody can respond or talk to me. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. Yeah, of course we can have a look at it, and I'm happy to talk to anybody at any time. But specifically with respect to assistance in that form would come from the Ministry of Social Welfare. But we'd be glad to, and I'm sure we could have a discussion with the PSL also with regarding those issues and see how we can assist. Okay.
Any more questions, queries? Thank you.
Sir, thank you very much, and to all the ministers. I think just one or two things. I think whilst we are doing, every effort has been given in all dimensions. Equally important, we see and note that government is giving to agriculture sector, and that also includes the sugar. More has been given for the food security too. One thing that we note now that more of the people have fallen back on the agriculture sector. Even the working professionals are buying farm inclusive of the sugarcane farm. I get an application of the guys withdrawing FNP up to buy a sugarcane farm, and in the agriculture sector, which is very good. And the point is that a lot of these commodities been produced, and we would be looking for market outside. So actually I have made a budget submission through Ministry of Trade, whether there is a possibility to set up an international marketing authority under Ministry of Trade. So the role of those will be with the trade commissioners to look for our commodities export to outside market. So that's a suggestion. And the other point was access to finance. Especially in the agricultural sector, the cost of borrowing with FDB may be something that the government may ask them to look at it. It seems a bit expensive for when you look at SMEs and microfinance sectors to borrow from there. Thank you, that's all.
Since I'm sure they're being looked at in that particular the first issue that you had. Regarding the cost of funds, yes, I mean, we constantly are looking at the cost of funds. I mean, FDB, as you know, goes out and borrows from the market, and then they actually then give that money out in credit. But recently, as announced by the Minister for Commerce and Trade, this new facility we're giving for micro enterprises, the interest rate is 0.5%. For small enterprises, 1%, medium enterprises, 1.5%. And that is also applicable to the agricultural sector too. In fact, the applications are vetted by the Ministry of Agriculture. So we are working in those aspects. And again, we recognize the fact that cost of funds can be something that needs to be looked at, but also in terms of the cost of credit itself. Thanks.
Ma'am, may this comment be just mine, not hold all to the organization that I represent. On the ground, when we are talking about microfinance and grants, one of the greatest weaknesses that I have pointed out is literacy program of controlling of finances. If the ministry could please empower the program that used to go on before, the literacy programs in finances on the ground root level, I think it'll be very impacting. As some of the small business people, they have the skills, they have the ability, but it's only how to control the monetary value or the money in terms of banking and how to run their business in daily lives. For example, we have a case that we have a microfinance case. This was very empowerment to us. She said that we always intend blame the government for everything, but no. We need to equip and empower our individual self so that we know where we stand. So I'm asking you, ma'am, if this could be reiterated again in your level, going down towards the community. It'll be a very powerful impact. Thank you.
The Reserve Bank of Fiji does organize financial inclusion programs at the community level and also through the education system. And they often partner with the UN Pacific Financial Inclusion Program. But thank you for your suggestion. We'll certainly look at that.
Sorry, ma'am, especially here in Lautoka, everything is based in Suva. For assistance of microfinance, everything is in Suva. For us to be able to assess the ability, it takes us a lot of proposal drawing up, money to pay for accommodation for trainers to come and stay here in Lautoka. If this could be internally activated by the Ministry of Finance, just like 2-3 staff, to go like and do so, it'll be really powerful.
Yes, I can confirm that if you contact, in fact, Faisal is here. He's part of MSME Fiji from the ministry. If you contact him, he'll let you know the exact locations and what's available. And yes, we do provide training. Thank you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, if there are no further questions, thank you for your attendance, but just some key points. Please remember that we have this economic recovery framework. You can get it on the website. Please look at it. It also includes, for example, Fiji Airways has put in place the measures they are going to have now, the new norm, the new protocols that are going to be put in place. What happens when you go and check in? How will the flight attendants deal with the passengers? And of course, we've got the various announcements we made. The vacation in paradise, what we call the VIP lanes, they'll be set up regarding the coming in of the Australian New Zealand tourists coming to Fiji. Please ensure that you download the Care Fiji app, because the more downloads we have, the more we're able to tell the world that it's safer to come to Fiji, because we've got this contact tracing app that's up there. I think the last count, we had, 28? We have now over 27,000 people that have downloaded the app. That's from Sunday till today. But we really should be hitting about 100,000 mark in the first week or so. So please do so. And as we've said, that the budget now will be announced on the 17th, not now, but budget will be announced on the 17th of July. A week after that, then we'll have the debate on the budget. We look forward to your collaboration. I know many of you are going through the various, motions in respect of reviving your businesses. We're here to obviously assist you. You can have discussions afterwards should you wish to do so. The Minister is here from Commerce and Trade. Dr. James Fong is here. The PSO Economy is here, and also the Director General of Digital Fiji Tupo is also here too. So you can have a chat with them. So thank you very much for coming. We need to continuously engage with this. As we said, the only constant thing, the only certainty about this pandemic is that is the uncertainty it presents to us. And we need to be able to ensure that we roll along as things change. We need to be flexible in the way that we deal with business. We need to be flexible in respect of how to respond to certain circumstances. This is a great opportunity to be able to look at our own businesses, the structure. Government is obviously looking inwards too, in respect of how we can do things better to be able to respond and be able to deal with this particular phenomena. So thank you very much, and wish you a good day. Vinaka, thank you.